Here we are, boys and girls, for our adventure of the week. And we have a very unusual and unique one for you this time because we are here with Mr. Paul Volz, who is a herpetologist. And I'm going to let Mr. Volz tell you what that word means.
Well, that's just a big word for somebody who likes snakes and knows a little bit about snakes. So in a nutshell, that's what a herpetologist is.
I say, could you tell me how you got interested in snakes? That's a very unusual thing to have for a pet.
Well, I tell you, it beats having a dog or a cat around the house. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to walk it in the morning. It doesn't annoy the neighbors. But no, we, a little over 20 years ago, while camping with the family up in the Adirondacks, we saw some children playing with snakes. They were small garter snakes. And I was in my 30s at that time, and I figured, my goodness, I was 3 times as old as these kids, and I was afraid of these snakes. So hey, come on, kid, let me see that, and show me how to do it. And before we were done, I was letting it run through my fingers and holding it up, and I ran to show my wife and my kids, and we got all excited about it. Before we were, when we left the campgrounds, we came home with about 9 garter snakes that we were able to pick up there. It wasn't against at that time. And that sort of touched something off in me. And I was bitten, as it were, not necessarily by the snake, but by the enjoyment of having snakes. And that October, for my birthday, the family chipped in and bought me a large snake from a pet shop. It happened to be an indigo snake, which is, again, no longer available. They're federally protected now. And then through the next few months or years, I would either go out and hunt snakes or buy them at pet shops or trade them with people, and just have had this as a hobby and even a little business for about 20, 25 years.
Did you just learn from these children how to handle them, or did you go to special classes then on down the road away? Or
well, there weren't any snake schools in those days, so it was pretty much learning initially from the kiddies, and I just sort of let it wrap around my hand and finger it and so. And then when we came home from this vacation trip, I went to the library and I went to the pet shops and I asked questions and looked at them, and I eventually joined the New York Herpetological Society and found out that there were many people just like myself, just a little different than most people, but in their liking for these types of animals anyway. And I just enjoyed everything about them.
Where do you keep these pets when you're at home?
I keep one right here.
Yes, I've been watching that one right down there, wiggling around.
Get him out of his little traveling bag here. Incidentally, there's no problem. They can breathe through the cloth bag. This one is a harmless snake, a very friendly one, incidentally. It's called a pine snake, and he is native or indigenous to the Pine Barrens area, wherein we are right here now at Keswick.
Mm-hmm.
And
very pretty.
Yeah, isn't he nice? He's sticking his tongue out at you, and that's not being naughty, Aunt Jean, because I know children are not supposed to, well, none of us are supposed to stick our tongues out at people, but he's doing the equivalent of what we might do of smelling. He's sticking his tongue out to sense the air and to smell where his dinner might be coming from. But no, you can't have Aunt Jean for dinner. No, you cannot. You asked where I keep them. When I'm not keeping one on my lap like this to show you, I keep them in glass cages with some weights on the top so they don't get out in a warm room in my basement, the room that has the furnace in it for heating the house, because snakes are cold-blooded and they have to be kept at a nice warm temperature or they'll get sick and die.
Well, he seems like he's pretty strong moving around there. They must have very powerful muscles.
They do. They have a regular skeletal framework. If we could take an X-ray picture of them, you'd see a strong backbone and dozens, maybe even hundreds of smaller ribs, and then a very strong muscular framework as well. And while we're at it, if I hold this end, why don't you hold some portion of the middle here, just to sort of show the boys and girls that snakes are not slimy, they're not wet at all. Sort of feels like a vinyl pocketbook or something,
yes, it does.
Sort of shiny, like cellophane or
and you
plastic.
can feel all those muscles moving around inside there.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful. Yes. You know, people have the idea that snakes are slimy, and of course they shine, so they give that impression even when you're looking at them. Mr. Bolt, how many snakes do you have?
Well, in addition to the pine snake that I'm holding, I have a garter snake, and the garter snake is a local garden variety snake who eats little toads and fishes and worms, and it's found very commonly in gardens throughout the East. It's harmless, could give you a nasty little bite, but no more probably than a little kitten would. Then we have a hognose snake. The hognose snake eats about the same as the garter snake does. He flattens out his head, sort of like a cobra, as he tries to scare people away. Sometimes that scares them too much and they think he's a poisonous snake, and he winds up getting chopped up into little pieces. So that's not too smart on his part. Our king snake. The king snake will generally not eat the same kind of cold-blooded food. He wants to get into the warm-blooded mice and rats, small squirrels, and oddly enough, he'll also eat other snakes. One of the reasons he's called the king snake is that he can survive the bite of a poisonous rattlesnake without dying, without even getting sick. Incidentally, the rattlesnake can't survive his own bite. If he should accidentally bite himself, he's liable to get sick and die, but the king snake can. The corn snake, that's also known as the red rat snake, is a beautiful little snake. He also is protected, just as all snakes in New Jersey are, and he's also on the endangered list, meaning that there aren't too many of them around, and the state wants them to be protected from people keeping them as pets or from killing them or hurting them. His name, corn snake, does not mean that he's going to eat corn on the cob or even corn off the cob, but he eats the mice that would be in the cornfields trying to eat the corn. And then, of course, we've got the pine snake, and I've got two pine snakes, really, one of them very active and one of them very quiet. And the very active one is just wrapping around my hand and constricting in an effort to strangle me as he would a rat or a mouse or a squirrel, and then he would eat it. The next snake is the boa constrictor. Now, boa constrictors are not found in New Jersey. In fact, you'd have to travel to Central America or South America, but I've had this one as a pet for about 8 years. He was about 1/3 the size and about 1/5 the weight when I first got him. He will eat basically the same as the others, mice or rats or even almost full-size squirrels and any other furry type animals to sustain himself.
And Paul, if some of the boys and girls were out in the woods and happened to come across a snake, what should they do?
I guess my best advice to boys and girls and mommies and daddies is be careful. Don't touch them. Don't pick them up unless you know somebody like Uncle Paul or like some adult who has done some studying about them, and they can assure you that it's a non-poisonous snake, because you might think it looks something like one you've seen on a show or in a zoo and it's non-poisonous, and you could pick them up and you could get a very nasty bite or even get sick or under certain circumstances even die from a bite from a poisonous snake, and you would not want to do that, so just stay away from them.
Well, thank you so much for letting us see your snakes today. This really has been great and certainly has given us a lot of information. And maybe, boys and girls, it's taken away some of the fear that you have of snakes, just as I have. I didn't think I'd ever touch one, but I did.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Miss Jean. I've brought some of my friends along here, and I don't know if it happens to fall in the category of your friends or not, but these are snakes. I'm a herpetologist, and a herpetologist likes snakes. Would you care to pet this one, Miss Jean? Not now, huh? All right, well, maybe later. Okay, this little fella is a king snake. We find him in various patterns and colors throughout the country, and in some places called different things, but basically he's a king snake. And he's called a king snake because he is king of the snakes. In other words, he eats other snakes for his meals. Snakes will eat a variety of things. Very few of them actually eat other snakes. Most of them will eat mice and rats and hamsters and gerbils and things of that nature. Some of our garden variety snakes, their diet is generally limited to things like worms and toads and small fishes. But your king snake enjoys eating other snakes. Another snake, incidentally, makes a perfect meal, a perfect type of meal for a snake. You've probably noticed that snakes don't have any kind of arms or hands or any other way of holding their food. Now, some of them are constrictors, and your king snake also happens to be a constrictor. A constrictor is, another word for constrictor is a choker or a strangler. And basically what he will do, as say we would feed him a mouse, he would bite it with his jaw and then just wrap a few folds of his body around the mouse and just squeeze or constrict until the mouse stopped breathing. You've probably heard stories or movies of where the snake crushed the animal or the person to a bloody pulp. Generally, that's untrue. In fact, most of the stories you hear about snakes are untrue. But all the snake has to do is hug or constrict or choke or strangle, as it were, the mouse or the rat or even the other snake, in the case of a king snake, until it stops breathing, and then he'll proceed to eat it. The eating process is very unique with a snake. As I said before, he strangles it or chokes it or stops it from breathing, and then just takes his mouth and puts it over his prey, over the little animal, and just sort of walks it over with his jaw. Now, our jaws generally open just this much. You know, we sort of hinge at the back, and I guess we do enough damage with our jaws, with our mouth, just opening and closing that much. But a snake not only can open this way, he's also unhinged at the back, and the lower jaw separates. So what he can do with these recurved teeth as he bites into another animal, he can just sort of walk his upper and lower jaw over the animal. Now, I'm getting all tied up here in my work here, and he's not necessarily constricting me, but snakes like to get the feel that they're holding on to something, and obviously he's holding on to me. Okay, let's untangle there a little, buddy. Sometimes they get around my digital watch and change the date on me. Okay, we'll put him in the little cage here for a couple of minutes. All right. Well, that's a king snake. The next little fellow we keep him in the pillowcase bags here. The folks wonder sometimes whether or not a snake can breathe in a pillowcase, but I'm sure if we've ever put a handkerchief up to our nose or even put a pillowcase over your head, you'll find you can breathe. Don't stay too long, though. It gets sort of stuffy. Okay, this is a corn snake, a very beautiful specimen, and incidentally, on the endangered list in many states of the country. The corn snake's other name is the red rat snake, and throughout the country you'll find the red rat, the black rat, and the yellow rat snake, all in the same family. He gets his name not from the fact that he eats corn on the cob, but that, or corn off the cob for that matter, but that he frequents the corn fields where the rodents are and rids them, or helps the farmer to rid them of mice or rats that would destroy his cornfield or whatever other type of grain. I have some statistics from about 20 years ago that show that a snake something like this, or the king snake, or any rat or mouse-eating snake, is worth about $300 a year to a farmer in protecting his crop. And you can put that in reverse if you want. For every snake that a farmer kills, he's probably going to lose somewhere around $300 worth of crop, because he's then permitting the rats and the mice to take over. A very beautiful snake. In fact, I think all snakes are beautiful. I think God outdid himself as he created snakes and really made them some of the most beautiful animals in the world. Well, let's put Mr. Corn Snake down for a minute here. Generally, I don't keep the snakes in as small a cage as we've got here, but just for our display, we will. Incidentally, these snakes are non-poisonous. They're harmless. We use the term harmless. That doesn't mean they can't bite. They can bite, they do bite, and I've been bitten many times by harmless snakes. But by harmless we mean they are non-poisonous. Oh, there's a big fella. All right, let's get him out of here. This is a pine snake, also on the endangered list. I like to put him up around my neck for several reasons. He enjoys the warmth of my body, and it sort of gives me a nice little balanced place in which to hold him here. Okay, Piney, he does it now. Okay, pine snakes are also constrictors, and he is doing a little constricting job on my neck here. In fact, emphasizing what I said before about not really having to crush a person or an animal to a bloody pulp or break every bone in his body to kill him. If I would have just let him have his way here for just another minute, he's giving me a constriction or a choking around the neck here. He's tightening up around my neck, and at one time or another, I've actually started to pass out when I didn't realize what he was doing. I'm aware of it now, and as long as you can peel him off, there's no worry about that. I mentioned about poisonous snakes. Okay, Piney, let's calm down here. I mentioned about poisonous snakes. I have a poisonous rattlesnake pickled here in alcohol or formaldehyde, and very honestly, that's about as close as I like to get to poisonous snakes, is when they're incapacitated in that form. Poisonous snakes are generally, in the United States, are generally identified by having a pair of fangs in the roof of their mouth, and as they come to a person or an animal, generally the animal that they're going to eat, they will strike it with their fangs. And these fangs are sort of like twin hypodermic needles. And he'll hit it and then, and the sacs of venom in the gums are squeezed out, and just like getting a shot, just like going to the doctor or hospital and getting a shot, this venom comes into the body of the animal or the person. And it depends a lot on the size of both the animal or the person. People ask, how fast would you be hurt or killed or by the bite of a rattlesnake or a copperhead or a cottonmouth water moccasin? A lot of it depends on the age and size of the person being bit, on the size of the snake doing the biting, when he last did his biting. Maybe he just bit an animal 10 minutes ago and shot out most of his venom, and when he comes to bite you, there's not too much left. Also, if he catches you in the finger or in the vein or some other delicate part rather than in a fleshy part, you can expect a lot more pain and suffering, and if not treated properly, eventually death. Careful, buddy. Okay. Notice he's sticking his tongue out. Now, he's not being naughty. We're not going to make him stand in the corner for sticking his tongue out. He is sensing. It's sort of the snake's equivalent of smelling. Now, when we go into a room, maybe a room where there is an odor, or when Mom is cooking dinner or so, we'll go in and, we've got fried fish, or we've got chicken or whatever. Well, the snake can't like so, but what he does is he sticks his tongue out. He uses that to locate prey or to identify his surroundings. Notice also, maybe you can hear him hissing. His hissing in the pine snake, which incidentally is the eastern cousin of the western bull snake. The pine and bull snake, among others, have this habit, this defense mechanism of hissing to try to scare you away. All snakes have some sort of a defense mechanism. Maybe it's a foul odor that they'll spew out of their vent. Maybe it's a hissing, maybe it's a rattle or trying to imitate a rattlesnake. But this fellow right now is sensing with his tongue. He flicks it out and picks up some of the minute particles of odor that are floating around, and then thrashes this tongue back into his mouth, where a set of glands identify those organs. And as a snake, most snakes in fact, do their feeding and hunting at night. So as he's crawling along the forest floor, his tongue is going out, and he's sensing where the next meal might be. Also, they don't have any ears as such, but throughout the length of their body, they pick up the vibrations of the animal or whatever it is on the forest floor. This is a pine snake, a very beautiful specimen, and also, as I mentioned, endangered. Now we're going to have to squeeze a little to get him in here, but he fits. There we go. Okay, down, boy. We have another one here. Incidentally, I mentioned the endangeredness of several of these snakes, and various states throughout the country have certain types of snakes protected. Now, you've heard of eagles being protected, and alligators and buffalo and things of that nature. It's the same thing, where you're not allowed to shoot them or hunt them or kill them. In fact, in many states, you must have a permit issued by the Environmental Protection Agency before you're even allowed to keep them. I show you this one, which is also a pine snake, but just to give you a little difference in personality. Now, the first one just sort of laid there and wrapped around me just a little bit. But this fellow was just all kind of excited and all over the place. Incidentally, let me mention something too. It hasn't happened yet, but it very well could. You cannot housebreak a snake. Now, snakes make very excellent pets if you can obtain them legally and if you are a responsible type of person that really wants to take care of them and enjoy them. But you can't housebreak them. And at any time, and quite frequently when I'm doing a program such as this, we find evidence of the fact that you can't housebreak them. So if that should happen, I've got some tissues here and we'll take care of that very natural function. You might wonder about snakes. I know a lot of people will ask, how can you tell a boy snake from a girl snake? Or how do they reproduce? Well, let me just untangle this fellow a little bit. Okay, snakes have basically two openings. One is their mouth, and obviously in the mouth is where all of the biting and the eating and everything that goes into the body goes in through the mouth. Down near the tail, and depending on his size, come on, hold still. Depending on his size, is what we call the vent. And this is where all of the body excretions and the sexual activity takes place. As I said, you do have male snakes and you have female snakes. And there's no way of peeling their skin apart or looking into their eyes or another way measuring their head or anything to attempt to tell which is a boy snake and which is a girl snake. There is a way of measuring the distance between the vent and the tip of the tail and the thickness to identify male and female. It is a little tricky, and generally it's hard to do if you don't have a male and a female. This happens to be a female with a long, narrow, slender tail from the vent to the tip. If it were a male, it would be fatter, thicker, and stubbier. It wouldn't be as long coming from the vent. Okay, now talking about snakes as in their reproductive processes, as I said, there must be a male and there must be a female, and they cohabitate, I guess is a good word. They get married, and then they have babies. Their babies, in some cases, are born live. And just as a cat or a dog would bear a live baby, so do many snakes. And those babies would come out of the vent one at a time, generally wrapped in what looks like a little plastic cocoon. Obviously, it's a little afterbirth type of thing, and some skin and flesh and a little yolk sac, sort of like an egg yolk that they have been living on. And this, hold still, baby. The mother snake will discharge these live-borns where they are live-born, and then have nothing else to do with them. Very different than cats or dogs or even little baby mice or rats who come out and are helpless for the first maybe 10 days. Maybe their eyes might not open, or their ears or their fur develop or anything. But a snake, as it comes out, if it's a live-born snake, as it comes out, is ready to go. If it's a poisonous snake, it even has its own percentage of poison in it and is ready to go. If it's an egg-laying snake, now I mentioned live-bearing, many of them, and the pine is one of them, is an egg-laying snake. And the mother snake would lay a clutch of eggs, and they're sort of a sticky, gooey mess of eggs, and they'll all be sort of piled together in one place. And she'll know just where and when to lay them, maybe in a pile of moss or leaves where just the right amount of sun and moisture will get to them. And I don't know exactly how long, several weeks or months later, the little eggs will open up. The baby snakes and egg-laying, who are egg layers, have an egg tooth, and they use that to sort of chew their way out of the egg. I've got some eggs here. This is eggs from an indigo snake, and an indigo snake is about the size of that large pine I had a few minutes ago. And here is an egg from one of our smaller varieties to give you an idea of the size difference. But the baby snake will chew his way out of this egg and then again be a free agent. The mother has no help in feeding them or in protecting them. You might hear stories of where a mother snake, upon sensing danger, called all the babies into her mouth and into her stomach, and somebody swears that they saw all these baby snakes crawling one at a time into the mother's mouth to be protected in her stomach. Well, that's a fallacy, because first of all, snakes don't have this maternal instinct, this motherly protection. Likewise, if the mother snake were, as a king snake who's a cannibal, if a mother snake were to take her babies into her stomach, the digestive acids in her stomach would immediately start to work on her babies and probably kill them in the process. So let's put this little active fellow in there. Well, Miss Jean, I do hope you enjoyed my few friends here.
Join us again on a future program when Mr. Volz shows us more of his interesting snakes. You won't want to miss it.
Miss Jean, we found this one in your backyard. Not really. Not really, unless you live in South or Central America. This is a, well, let's get him out first. Where are you? Hello down there. Hello. All right. Okay. Let's see now, which end is which. This is a boa constrictor, and he's about 7 feet long and weighs about 30, 35 pounds, so it does help to balance him, or her really, over my shoulder. This is Samantha. At one time, we thought Samantha's name, well, Samantha was named Sam. They thought it was a male. And she's about 16 years old. She's a beautiful snake. In fact, she's just recently shed. You can notice the shiny skin, the shiny hide, as it were. Balance off there a little, baby. Okay. Snakes have a way of shedding their skin. Let me see if I can get this shed skin over here. Through the years, our skin is constantly shedding. We have quite a few layers of skin, and the outer layer, I believe it's called the epidermis, is always shedding. That's very visible in the form of dandruff, but also with, hold still, baby. It's always shedding. Now, snakes don't perpetually or continuously shed. What they do is frequently, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year, depending on the animal, will shed their entire skin, the entire outer layer of skin. It's sort of like if we get sunburn and it peels, and you would be peeling big piece of it off, but this comes off generally in one big lump, one big string, as it were. Sometimes it comes off in pieces more like this, looking sort of like a rolled up stocking, and it's all moist from the oil that the snake puts out between the new skin and the old skin. And by peeling it off, you can get it to come out this length. This happens to be from Sam. When they shed, the shedding process starts right at the lips, goes over the eyes, down through the entire body, right down to the tail. Even the eye lenses are replaced. I did mention the rattlesnake before, and you can see, if you look closely at a rattlesnake, and I guess you don't want to look too closely, you'll see that a rattlesnake has elliptical or cat's slit type eyes, whereas the majority of your American snakes have round eyes. Also, your rattlesnake has like 2 sets of nostrils. The second set he doesn't use for breathing. They're actually heat sensors. And he can feel, determine, sort of like almost like a radar, like a heat-seeking device. He can feel where his prey, or his mouse or his rat is with those sensors. In the event that a person would be bitten by a poisonous snake, there are several things that shouldn't be done and several things that should be done. First of all, to get as quickly as possible to professional medical assistance, preferably a hospital. If not a hospital, certainly a doctor. There should be a minimum of effort. In other words, don't run. There should not be any sort of a medication or anything taken. Now, how to tell whether you've been bitten by a poisonous snake or a non-poisonous? I've mentioned earlier where a poisonous snake has two fangs, and you will find these two hypodermic needle marks, these holes where he has bitten and struck into you. A snake, if this snake were to bite me or any of the others, you would find instead a U-shaped or a horseshoe-shaped pattern above and below where the bite came, and there'd be all these little dots of blood start to appear. There's no worry about that type of bite. You just put a little mercurochrome or wash it and clean it if necessary, a little Band-Aid on it. But if you are bitten by a poisonous snake, obviously seek professional help.